and welcome back to our channel. My name is Dr. Kosta Cvijovic. I'm the CEO and founder of Cvigilance, a full-service pharmacovigilance CRO. Today we are going to talk a little bit about the basics of pharmacovigilance. To begin with, what is pharmacovigilance? The World Health Organization, the WHO, defines pharmacovigilance as the science and activities related to the detection, assessment, understanding, as well as prevention of adverse effects or any other drug, medicine, or vaccine-related problem. It also includes the analysis and prevention of risks. Furthermore, it includes risk management, the prevention of medication errors, as well as information on medicines to be distributed to healthcare professionals, HCPs, and/or patients. And finally, it includes the promotion of rational use of medications. Now, pharmacovigilance is the science of adverse effects. What are adverse effects? Again, the WHO defines these as any untoward and/or unwanted reaction to any medication. This can include medication errors, such as a wrong dose administered to a patient. It can also include off-label use. Now, as most of our viewers are healthcare professionals or professionals in the pharmaceutical industry, I like to give an example of off-label use that's a little bit of a brain teaser, so you guys can think about why this applies and how it happened. Specifically, the example is, why were erectile dysfunction medications, ED medications, given off-label to children? You guys can pause the video at this point, think a little bit about it, and then come back for the solution. ED medications were originally developed, as most of you probably know. They were developed for use in cardiology. However, during clinical trials, it turned out that they are very effective at treating ED. The reason is their PDE5 inhibition, which is a receptor that is found in blood vessels that allow for treatment of ED. Another disease that is affected by the PDE5 receptors is pulmonary hypertension. The reason for this is that the vasodilation of blood vessels in the lung also can be triggered by the use of these medications. Pulmonary hypertension is a disease that was very difficult to treat with before PDE5 inhibitors were introduced, and it also affects many children. So this is the reason why ED medications were used off-label to treat pulmonary hypertension in children. The companies that make ED medications applied for new indication for their products, and of course there are now specific products used to treat just pulmonary hypertension. However, when doctors and healthcare professionals first realized that ED medications can be used to treat pulmonary hypertension, they had to be used off-label. This is also a safety issue and may need to be reported as an adverse event. Sometimes it is very difficult to draw the line between unwanted or untoward effects. For example, an oral contraceptive may not work too well and the woman taking it may get pregnant. However, she may not experience this as an untoward or bad event because she is happy about the pregnancy. Now we talked a little bit about adverse effects in general, and now we're going to talk about the regulatory terms of adverse events or adverse drug reactions. So an adverse event in general is any untoward health occurrence that happens while a patient is under therapy with the medication. The difference to the adverse drug reaction is that this constitutes a causal connection between the event and the medication. So, any adverse drug reaction is also an adverse event, but not all adverse events are adverse drug reactions. In order for an event to be an adverse drug reaction, we have to establish a causal link to the medication. Let's talk about some of the examples in history of how pharmacovigilance developed. Certainly one of the most dramatic examples, and what truly triggered the development of pharmacovigilance systems worldwide, was the thalidomide event in the 60s. What happened was that thalidomide was a medication developed against morning sickness in pregnant women. During clinical trials, no major adverse events were observed, and it was concluded that it was a medication safe to be taken by pregnant women. Unfortunately, it did turn out that the medication can be teratogenic. The reason for this is in its stereochemistry. Thalidomide appears in two enantiomers that act like the left and right hand of the human body. They are mirror images, but they are not identical in their pharmacological effect. During clinical trials, only one enantiomer was used, specifically the one that was not teratogenic. But when the medication was manufactured on an industry level, both enantiomers were produced, and it turned out that the other one was teratogenic. Unfortunately, this teratogenicity resulted in severe congenital defects in the children, leading to either severe impairment or death in many cases. This is the reason why the first pharmacovigilance systems globally were created to prevent such events from occurring. There are some rare and important adverse drug reactions that typically you wouldn't learn during a regular medical, pharmaceutical, or scientific education, but that can occur with some medications and that are very important for a pharmacovigilance professional to know and be familiar with. These include, for example, agranulocytosis, which is a rare so-called idiosyncratic adverse drug reaction, meaning that it occurs typically only in a small number of patients that happen to have a genetic makeup that lets them react to this drug in a particular way without there being a particular pharmacological mechanism behind it. Agranulocytosis can be shortly described as basically the shutting down of the immune system, letting even very small infections turn into a sepsis and becoming very, very dangerous. The next examples would be Stevens-Johnson syndrome, which is a rare and potentially fatal effect that begins at the skin and then can affect many organs, can also have a fatal outcome. The next example would be osteonecrosis of the jaw, again a very rare effect, but that can be very detrimental. And as we already mentioned, with the example of agranulocytosis, there are a number of other idiosyncratic adverse drug reactions that are just very patient-specific and occur in a very small amount of the patient population. Thank you very much for watching this video where we covered the basics of pharmacovigilance in terms of adverse events and adverse drug reactions. In the next video, we're going to talk about some other basic aspects of pharmacovigilance, such as regulatory bodies and what constitutes an individual case safety report. If you like our content, please like and subscribe, and please leave a comment so that we know what topics you would like to hear more about.